Welcome to Life List, a birding podcast.
Hello. Welcome, everybody. I am George Armistead. This is Life List, a birding podcast. Molly Brown is someplace in the remote Sonoran or Chihuahuan desert right now in Arizona, but I am here with Alvaro Jaramillo. Al, what is happening, man?
Hi, I'm not in the remote desert, but
that's good.
Yeah, and I don't have a Chihuahua, but
no Chihuahua for you.
No Chihuahua.
Ay, Chihuahua.
Chihuahua. It's a funny word, you know. If the little dog was a name for the state, we wouldn't even think about it. But now you think of Chihuahua and Raven. I always think of the little dog, you know, that little dog head on a raven. I don't know. You know, have we offended everybody from the Estado de Chihuahua? Sorry.
I hope not. Have you ever heard somebody pronounce it Chihuahua?
Oh, I've always thought that was a joke, but Chihuahua.
I have heard that, and I've also wondered the same thing. But I've also heard people call the mountains in southeast Arizona the Chiricahuas.
Yeah.
So I think people do not understand necessarily how to pronounce that sound.
Yeah. I could see that. You know, it's like I was just thinking about the place where you stop to get coffee and snacks could also be Huahua. Wawa. Hua.
Yeah, boy, I got to stop at Wawa, which is kind of rare for me anymore, Al.
Maybe we should just explain what a Wawa is for somebody from Seattle who might have never.
Yeah, I think that would be a valuable use of everybody's time. Yeah, I mean, I dare say it is one of the more amazing experiences that one can have if you are a fan of the convenience store genre. A Wawa is, my understanding is that Wawa comes from the sound of what the Lenni Lenape thought the Canada goose sounded like. And that is the symbol on their, on their logo. And Wawas began where else, Alvaro, but the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia. The very first one, I think, was just outside the city. The second one was like my personal Wawa I grew up going to just barely inside the city limits in Northwest Philadelphia on Highland Avenue. That was an important place in my adolescence. A lot of coming of age stories that I'll save for another time happened at that particular Wawa. Which is now gone, but rest assured, everyone, there are Wawas to be found throughout the Delaware Valley, even beyond into New York City, down into Virginia, and then there's a gap in their range, and they're found again in sort of central Florida. Yeah,
the Wawa Gap. I've heard.
There's a disjunct population of them in central Florida.
Yeah, it's like these biogeographic lines, the Wawa line. You know?
As opposed to the Nazca line,
Wallace is the fact is that all these really, grown up people where you live actually say Wawa and they don't smile or laugh or anything because I just think that's a silly name, but it's like, but it is the goose, Canada goose, and it's all throughout, I think, all the way up to the north in Ontario. Wawa is also the Indigenous name for Canada goose.
Look at you.
And, Wawa, Ontario.
I was just going to say, there's a town in Canada.
Yeah, Wawa, Ontario.
Yeah.
And they don't have a Wawa. They have a Tim Hortons because that is the subspecies of Wawa. It's not really, actually. It's the subspecies of
It's more like a Dunkin' Donuts meets a Denny's,
Denny's.
Yeah, it's like a hybrid between a Dunkin' Donuts and a Denny's.
Wow, Denny's.
But it's better.
I don't know if I like that. I don't know if I like that.
Yeah. Well, the big argument here in Pennsylvania is what's better, Wawa or Sheetz. And that's sort of like Sheetz, kind of their range kind of, I feel like, hugs
anything
the Appalachians.
Called Sheetz is somewhere I would avoid.
Yeah. Well, Yeah, I mean,
do they say it's the sheets, like anything like that? Or, it's like this place, the food here, the food of your house, George, it's as good as sheets.
It's like, I can do better than this in sheets.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, perhaps we best not dwell on that too long, but it suffices to say it is a debate that survives and thrives. People are really, really territorial and defensive about which is better. Obviously, I fall in the range of Wawa, much more nostalgic for me. And I will say, I met with Holly Merker the other day and the campers from the ABA Camp Delaware Bay. And one of the first things I asked them, now I'd met them on their first day. I joined the group for the day, which was a ton of fun. I'll tell you about that too in a minute. But my first question was like, have you guys been to Wawa yet? Because a lot of the campers are from outside the region. And so it seems often on the camp over the course of the week that the campers get really invested in the Wawa visits, which tend to be close to daily. So yeah, it is a curiosity for those outside the region for sure.
Yeah, interesting. I've been there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the breakfast sandwiches, which are known as Sizzlies, are really quite exquisite, I would say. And myself, I prefer the biscuit with sausage, egg, and cheese. That is getting to be the harder one to find. Again, here it seems that my tastes may skew from the norm.
Yeah, they might skew from the norm. Ironically, I tasted that and I thought it was a little chalky.
Oh, Alvaro, how dare you?
Ironically, given you like that chalky flavor in your food. But hey, where were we?
Yeah. Perhaps a digression there. Yeah. Alvaro, tell me, I know you've been out in the field. Your voice even has that sort of, multi-day at sea huskiness going on, which I love to hear. It's kind of saucy, but tell us. What have you been seeing?
I've started smoking. That's what's going on. So,
you picked up smoking.
Yes, I picked up smoking. I figure,
Yeah, well, they say
I've
quitters never win.
always wanted to stop, so I figure I needed to start before I could stop.
Yeah, quitters never win. You gotta keep going.
So I've been on ocean trips. We had 3 trips this weekend. I went on 2 of them because you can't be on 2 boats at the same time.
This is true.
On TV maybe. And then last week we had 2 boats as well. So it's like 5 trips in the last 10-day period or something like that, or less.
Man.
7-day period? 8-day period? I don't know. I can't think. But and I've almost forgotten to. I mean, I don't know if we even talked about last week's trips at all yet.
I don't think so.
But the
last we heard was about the Cook's Petrel, I believe.
The Cook's Petrel.
That's been many moons ago.
That was many moons ago, right? And that was sort of inkling that something weird is going on offshore. And I do think something is weird is going offshore here. And one of the things that's sort of the key, the gravitational pull in my mindset is over fin whales. And fin whales are rare but regular offshore here, usually a little further south, most of them. We tend to see them in warm water. And this year, fin whales are quite common for some reason. And you get offshore and multiple times they've been the most common whale out there. And I started asking, well, what the fin whales eat, and I came up with what people sort of said, krill. Yeah, but blue whales eat krill. So we can sometimes have blue whales and no fin whales. And I think what happens is they eat krill and fish, and they're often further south or further offshore. And somehow that food is all concentrated right lapping up on that continental shelf edge.
Oh, wow.
And I think that means that the offshore water is very food poor.
Depauperate.
Yeah. So that's what I'm thinking is going on.
This sounds like a very good setup for you.
Very, very good setup. So what happened last week on the Saturday trip, which was a San Francisco city, county based boat trip where we wanted to go out offshore in the county waters. We did very well right at the moment we arrived at the continental shelf edge where the water gets deep. Lots of black-footed albatross, and within minutes, a Laysan albatross flew in.
Mm.
And as we were motoring around, we found Scripps' Merlet, and then we found it was Dorian Anderson, actually, who said, there's some storm petrels out over here. And we went over to the storm petrel flock. And we had seen fork-tail storm petrels, and there were lots of fork-tail storm petrels and lots of ashies. This is a little further south than fork-tails tend to be in numbers.
Such a beautiful seabird, too.
Yeah. And that was exciting, right? Because they're like, you don't see them all the time, and they're this cold water species from the north. And then what was weird is I spotted a least storm petrel.
Mm.
And the least storm petrel is absolutely rare here, and it's a warm water species from the south. So, and we were screaming all least storm petrel and so on. And you know what? It actually, when we screamed out, it got back to the other side of the boat as Leach's storm petrel, and they were watching a Wilson storm petrel, and they got all confused. They didn't know we were watching least storm petrel, which is much rare. So we go back there and say, oh, did you guys get it really well? So I get what? The least. What? No, we didn't see it at all.
Oh, man.
So it was like one of those like, oh, no, what are we going to do? And I said, it's got to be around here. And I spotted it again. And then we got to see it. There were 3 observations. And we feel, in fact, there might have been more than one bird, just like multiple birds.
Mm-hmm.
But in that day, we saw 5 species of storm petrel. There were a couple of blacks, Wilsons, least, fork-tailed, and ashy storm petrel. So had we seen
anything
else, and Leach's was the most likely after, would have been a 6 storm petrel day, which is unbelievable. So the fact is that the people from San Francisco, longtime birders, decades long, it was either a lifer or a county bird for every one of them. So it was a huge success.
How many, what were the numbers of the fork-tails like?
I think it was like 150 or something, something like that. Maybe a couple hundred ashies. So we thought nothing could be better than that trip, right? And we go back, and the next day we did a deep water trip from Half Moon Bay, which is a little further south. And we get out there and we start seeing the Scripps' merlets, and it was a choppy day. It wasn't like a calm day. And these little merlets are very hard to find unless you have calm water. And in the end, we saw 20 Scripps' merlets that day. 20 in choppy water means there were hundreds of them around.
Wow.
Which is what we think was going on. It's weird, right?
Yeah.
But as we were out there looking for storm petrels, thinking in our mind, we're thinking we're going to find some storm petrels here too, and it's going to be we're going to find something cool. We didn't have as much luck with storm petrels, right? It's always seabirding is that way. You have in your mind what you think is out there because of what you've just seen, and in fact, something else happens. And we find Laysan albatross, and then we find another Laysan albatross, and we were out. There's oil. We're dripping some oil as we go along for fish oil and so forth. And eventually, it was like second Laysan, lots of black-footed albatrosses. And as we're sitting there at one point, we're sitting. I don't know why we were sitting there. I don't think we were moving. Maybe we're moving very slowly. The Dorian again says, this one's got a pink bill. And pink bill means a short-tail albatross, right? And at first there was some hesitation with some people, like, is it? And then it was really obviously a short-tail albatross, a bright, really crisp juvenile. At that point, we actually have to stop all chumming because that's part of the rules. Like, this is a really rare bird. You don't, So we stop all that, and it didn't matter. I mean, the bird was flying around all around for a long time, and just gave us fantastic looks. And then eventually sat way up ahead of us, and we were able to just roll up on it and watch it sitting on the water, just doing its thing. And it's 3. So we went from a 5 storm-petrel day to a 3 albatross day, and in a sense, a lot of things make sense with water temperatures and so forth most times in the ocean. This time it didn't. There have been almost no leaf storm petrels seen in Southern California, and we
Weird.
saw them.
Yeah.
We, there are other things that just aren't matching like that Cook's petrel. They're not seeing them down south, yet we saw one. And then if this couldn't be like enough, yesterday, the trip I was not on because I was on the one going to the Farallon Islands, the Bodega Bay trip further north this time. They saw 6 at least, maybe up to 8, 3 at one time, Hawaiian petrels, which is good Lord, yeah. I mean, we used to struggle to see one ever,
yeah,
and they're just becoming more regular, and that was, I think, just a great day for them. They also saw lays and albatross. I mean, it's really, really going off here. Like, better than any other year thus far, and we haven't gotten to the peak.
I was going to say, it's not even September. Yeah,
not even September. So I don't know. It could be, we're peaking early. But give you an idea, that's only the second in what 12, 13 years. I don't know of my own trips of short-tail albatross. And we saw our first leaf storm petrels ever last year. So, and that's the max number of Hawaiian petrels I think perhaps ever seen in one day in near the coast in California. I don't think even the cruises in a day have seen as many as 6. I don't know. I don't know. Actually, that was a good question to pose for those who are in the know. Cook's petrels are sometimes, when you're offshore in those, repositioning cruises and stuff, they can be seen in multitudes and in Southern California, but Hawaiians tend to be one at a time kind of birds. So that is crazy.
Yeah, that is wild. That's 6 or 8 more than I've ever seen still.
Yeah.
That bird and the short-tailed would be genuine lifers for me. The short-tailed, it's, I think, a rare instance for me where the juvenile appeals to me more so even than the adult. That your images and other people's that I saw of that bird, this huge chocolate-colored bird with that big pink bill, it's really an eye candy seabird,
Right. And I guess there are only, even though their population's growing, was it like 3,000, 2,700 or something in the entire world?
That's less than I realized. I assumed it had climbed higher than that. As
Maybe
people many folks will remember that listen, but others probably will not know that the story with that bird is a pretty interesting one. They breed on, is it Torishima? Is that the islands? There's a couple now, I know.
Torishima, Yeah,
Torishima. And the big volcano erupted there, and they thought basically they'd maybe lost the entire population, like, was it 30 years ago or something? And then they didn't count on the juveniles, so we're out to sea, the youngsters, because they take like a long time to mature.
It wasn't the volcano, it was that they'd been hunted for feathers pre-World War II, and they drove the population nearly to extinction.
Oh, I thought maybe it was a combination of the two, but
and then because I don't think the volcano's ever actually blown up since they've gone up. They've started increasing, but they've wanted to ship them to another location because they worry that could happen. So, there is another island where they've been moving them to, and then about the third island. This is a real crazy story. It's called Senkaku.
I've heard about this, but it's
like, I guess nobody knew that there was a different little population elsewhere, and they're further out towards, I guess if you wanted to put it this way, the main group breeds of the main island of Japan. They breed to the east of Japan, but down to the south and west of Japan towards Taiwan, It's this little Senkaku island that's got a totally different ecology, water temperature, and there's a short-tailed albatrosses there. And it turns out genetically, they're actually quite distinct, and they have a different bill size. And now they're thought that they could be an entirely unknown, previously undescribed species of short-tailed albatross, which is crazy to me. And these birds are not banded. So one of the ways you identify them in the field is to look for a band. And if you have a banded bird, then it's the classic Torishima birds. And if you have no band, it could be Senkaku.
Wow.
So I was looking for a band, and the bird did have a little tiny, it was a really thin band, but it was there, so I was like, okay, so this is the classic one. But for a moment, somebody said, it's got no bands on it. And I was like, what? Because that would have been mind blowing if we could have ever seen this new population here in North America, or at least have an idea. Because I think every one of the ones on Torishima is banded. It's like every one of them. So crazy, huh?
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah. So that is it's just been seabirding nonstop for me, and I'm tired. It takes takes a lot out of you,
Yeah. Yeah.
For me, it was 2 trips to the Farallon, so we got to see a lot of puffins and blue whale, fin whale, humpback whales breaching. So it was
Morris.
Really cool.
Morris out there?
No, didn't see him at all. Actually, no, missed him.
Mo Bass. I'm going to try to get that. I'm still working on that. I want people to call him Mo Bass. I feel like that's a much cooler name. But.
Do you know? Also, like, there's been. This reminds me, because there's been a lot of people looking for Morris or lost gannet here, because it's a great bird for California. Pacific. Of course, it's the only one in the Pacific, but there are a number of birders who don't live in the Bay Area who have never seen it, because it hangs out for 4 or 5 days and it leaves and it goes somewhere else and it's gone for a month. So it's kind of, not reliable. And, but there's been a ton of people coming through the Bay Area this week, birders, like masses, because we had we still have a slate-throated redstart.
Oh, yeah.
That has shown up in San Francisco, and it's causing a commotion.
It sure is.
It was in the newspaper, even in the San Francisco Chronicle. So when bird makes it into newspaper, it's a big deal. So and then Morris took off. Like, there were a bunch of people seeing both, and they're like, bang, bang. And then he took off in the weekend. Nobody's seen him. So now there's been people who are like banking on seeing these 2 great birds, and then they're only seeing one, and then they're like, oh man, it's like, but if you come to see Morris, he's not here. There's great beer in the harbor. So it's like, you just go and have a beer and relax.
There's another good sulet out your way, that red-footed booby that's been up in Washington. Seems like a lot of folks going for that as well.
Yeah, I guess that is pretty far north for him. I've seen it seems like it's like a 1 year subadult, 1 year old, 2 year old bird, something like that.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
2 year old, something still with a pink bill on it. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Well, as you know, it's shorebird season here, Al, and much as I complain about summer, I have to say it's been quite a satisfying week to go out. Just to give you a quick synopsis, met up with our friends Brian Sullivan and Holly Merker for a quick loop around Forsyth Refuge, affectionately known as Brig, which had a lot of birds, and probably there's a couple American avocets there, 4 of them, which is, unusual bird for the state, sort of regular, but, scarce. And, but probably the most satisfying thing was we had like 70 plus stilt sandpipers, all adults. And just to see that number, is fun. And there was, it's such a great refuge. There's just thousands of birds there. And just a couple of hours of birding, we had 86 species and, thousands of birds. And it wasn't even actually that great a day there. it can be much, much birdier even than when we were there the other day. And then, as I mentioned, I met up with Holly again and the camp, Delaware Bay American Birding Association camp, which is awesome. Really great bunch of kids and campers, talented, inspiring bunch of campers, and really tremendous staff as well for the camp. They're doing really great work. I got there a little bit early before the camp rolled in, and was like, I'll just poke around a little bit. And I was perched up at kind of where one of the big concentrations of shorebirds was. And Raymond Pool there has been attracting a lot of shorebirds, thousands, many thousands actually. And I just sat there, and there's enough breeze that the greenheads didn't beat me up too badly. And eventually the camp rolled in, and we started birding together. And one of the campers named Vitus from Maryland, he says to me, "Hey, George, would you mind taking a look at this bird in the scope?" And I was like, "Sure," and I knew that all of us were kind of hoping to see some long-billed dowitchers. It's a good time of year for them, and there's about 3,000 to 4,000 short-billed dowitchers out there. And I thought, well, maybe he's got a nice red one with a long bill. And I looked through the scope, and all the way on the other side of the pool is this shorebird that is red, but it's like a deeper blood red, and it's got its head tucked in, and it's only a little bit bigger than the semi-sandpipers that it's surrounded by. And I'm looking at it, and my first gut is, man, this looks like the curlew sandpiper that we saw up in Utqiagvik, a few short weeks ago. But the odds of that are, pretty slim. Can't be that. But I'm looking at it, and I'm like, I can't make it into anything else. And sure enough, I was like, well, Vitus, I think this looks like a curlew sandpiper. And but let's get everybody on it, and we put scopes, and soon enough it picked its head up, and Glenn Davis is like, "Yep, that's what it is. Look at that bill. It's curlew sandpiper, which is a hell of a bird." So that was pretty exciting. Really exciting to see that bird, and it was fun the way it was located as well.
Yeah.
An exciting day, and those kids have had a good week. It sounds like, seeing some other good stuff too.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, it's good you refreshed your mind on what they look like, but from up in Alaska.
Yeah, our barrow bird helped with that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's often that situation where you spot something good in a random place, and you're there with birders, and they're like, "How'd you know it was whatever it was?" And it's often because I just saw some in India, like
Yep.
or wherever
exactly.
it might be. Because when you have a traveling guide birder, you get exposed to a lot of things, and it's not that we're amazingly skilled as much as we have recent experience.
Yeah, you just get familiar with stuff that is less familiar around here.
Yeah, exactly. Often people who I bird with have much better eyes and better memory than I do, but I just happen to know what it looks like because I've seen them before.
That's right. Yeah. Well, it's been pretty cool. I'm looking forward to doing some more shorebirding. It was pretty exciting, although we're set to get a lot of rain from this tropical storm that's in Florida right now, heading north. Looks like we get about 3 days of rain coming. So that'll put a damper on things to some degree. I don't think it's going to produce any interesting birds, but you never do know. So we'll see. But Al, I think we should talk about some big news that came out. I saw it on the Facebook page of this guy. Let's see, what was his name? It was Alvaro Jaramillo. That was it.
That was the guy.
Yeah, that was the
sure
guy.
That's how he pronounces.
Some people call him Jerry Miller. Jerry Miller sometimes. Yeah, but
Elvira.
Elvira. I like that one. I haven't heard that one before. But yeah, you kind of broke the mold on what we thought we knew about Oceanites storm-petrels this week. This is something I know you've been working on for years now, and boy, yeah, basically all this bird we thought was kind of one species, and well, really a couple,
Wilsons,
I guess,
for the most part, right?
Mostly Wilsons, yeah, is actually a couple different things, even more than we realized. But yeah, this is going to be a big reorganization of thought for this little bird that, Roger Tory Peterson once theorized might be the most abundant bird on the planet, right. The Wilson storm-petrel. Tell us, how did this storm-petrel get started? And tell us the story.
How the storm got started?
How the storm got a brewing.
Back some years ago, we were involved in that description of a brand new species of storm-petrel related to the Wilsons called the Pincoya storm-petrel. And that was in Chile. And what happened is that after the description came out and was accepted as a brand new species and so forth, there were some people out there that said, there's all this variable nature to these birds. Some of them have some white, and if you go north on the coast of Chile, they kind of, some of them, they get darker, and then you go up further and you have the real white bellied things that we know as Elliott storm-petrel, and there was this sort of insinuation that Pincoya storm-petrel really wasn't a thing, and it was just a really variable kind of what have you. And we started thinking, well, why don't we look into the genetics of it? Like if it is really a different thing, it should pop out as a separate genetic group from the others. And that's where we started. And we started getting material from different places. And the thing is that we had been also, like, the Chileans had been working on this bird that goes up into the Andes, right? And we trying to figure out where they nest, and we were thinking it was a Wilson's type storm-petrel, and it's going up into the Andes, nesting there. And they're finding, through their work, getting people to report these birds. They were getting some that they were taking back to the ocean that were landing in people's backyards, or some that were dead and so forth. So we were able to get material, like genetic material, from these birds. And what's started happening is that we realized that everything was way more complicated than we had thought. So
must have been a little scary at first when you started.
Yeah, it was like, sort of, if you had asked me, and I think if you'd asked people who are out there looking at these things, Peter Harrison or Steve Howell or Hadaram Shirihai, that have written books on seabirds, they would have said, yes, Wilson storm-petrel is multiple things, but here's how it's going to divide. It's that there's a Chilean thing called Fuegian storm-petrel. It's a little smaller, and it's got some pale on the underwing and stuff. And then there's the regular Wilson storm-petrel kind of everywhere else. And then Pincoya, some may have argued, obviously, it might be variable or something, but it was a different thing. But what we found out is that Wilson storm-petrel is actually multiple more things than that genetically in any ways, but they look the same. Or similar, difference in sizes, and some have other differences. But the ones that we sampled on the Falkland Islands are not the same genetic group as the ones that are in Antarctica, and they're not the same group as the ones that are in central Chile and the Andes. And it started getting really complicated. But when all of this starts happening, and I look at the trees, and, I should also backtrack and say that this work was done essentially, with no funding, very little funding. And it would not have been possible without one specific person who's the main author in this work, Geraldo Norambuena. And Geraldo has been sort of the Chilean bird person who started doing genetic work. And he started off as a birder interested in biology, and then now he's got a lab, and he's knows how to do this stuff. And then many of us who are involved are birders or conservationists, and we were sticking doing our bit here,
filling
trying to
in the
figure things
gaps.
out, filling in the gaps.
Yeah. So there's
coming up with
7
ideas.
or 8 of you that are
Yeah.
authors on this paper, and also including Rodrigo Barros, you,
Yeah.
Fernando Medrano, Chris Gaskin, Tanya King, Karen Baird, and Cristian Hernandez.
Yeah. And the core group really were the Chilean bird people, and the New Zealand bird people who were there. They actually happened to have worked on the birds in the Galapagos Islands, which is a kind of storm petrel that people have thought was part of the Elliott's storm petrel. But it's very hard to get genetic material from Galapagos, so we kind of collaborated there, with that genetic material to try to figure all this out. But basically, every single place that's got a slightly different looking storm petrel is a different genetic population, and some that don't look that different are a genetic population. But what was the frightening thing when we saw all of this is that the ones going up into the Andes were also a different genetic group, and I knew that nobody had ever given those a name, like that they were completely we knew they existed. We know a lot about them in a sense, but they actually scientifically hadn't been described as anything, subspecies, species, nothing. And they were kind of clumped with this Fuegian storm petrel, which is chilensis, and they're not even chilensis' closest relative in our tree.
All of there's what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,
right?
7 groups we're talking about here. All breed more or less coastally, or the breeding ranges aren't known, right?
Right.
But then there's this one group that breeds
in the Andes.
mountains.
We think we haven't found the nest, but they're flying up 2,000 meters in elevation consistently. Many of them going up into the mountains to nest, and they're isolated. They're not south of that. You don't detect any grounded storm petrels. North of that, there's like a gap. There's nothing until you get to the desert, and then in the desert, there are Elliott storm petrels. So we realized that this thing was unknown, and we gave it a name. So in this paper we've just written, not only have we sort of trying to sort out the relationships of these Wilson's type storm petrels, we feel that we've described a brand new species we call it the Andean storm petrel because of where it's supposed to be nesting. So
right, and it looks more or
crazy.
Less, yeah. And this bird, which the Andean one is basically like if you were to kind of drop down from Chile about halfway down, it looks like you've got where you guys think the breeding range is way up in the Andes, kind of right on the border with Argentina.
Yeah.
About halfway.
They're flying over the city of Santiago, some of them, to get to their breeding areas. So they're
yeah. Now, am I right? Do I remember the story right that when you first kind of came up with the theory for that idea, that you were sitting around with a few of your Chilean friends, like having beers in Santiago, and we're like, maybe they're flying over us right now, like up into the mountains and nesting up there. And then that kind of actually ended up being sort of true. Is that right?
Yeah. But what happened? Yeah, we were all sitting around in an open-minded state because we had opened many bottles of vino and beer.
I believe this story. Yeah, this is a believable story so far.
And we were all sitting there talking about the fact that we were talking about all of the great finds that the team had done in the deserts, finding the breeding areas of Markham storm petrels and all that, and how in the past those birds that have been seen in the desert near buildings, underneath street lamps and so forth, were always called storm-blown vagrants, or birds that had gotten lost in the fog or something, and that it never made any sense. And then sure enough, they're nesting in the desert, which nobody believed was true, or many people didn't believe was possible. And then it was in that state that I said, well, how about these birds that show up above Santiago every so often? Like, we all know, you get these records here and there. Maybe they're nesting up there. And then suddenly everybody was like, it was one of those.
The record goes off. Yeah. Record. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because nobody, in a sense, it was sort of like yeah, this craziness happens in the desert because nobody's there to see it. But this could not be happening right here over the city of Santiago, where we all kind of hang out and live, because it would be more obvious, or it would,
right. It can't be hiding in plain sight.
Can't be hiding in plain sight.
Yeah.
But the moment that they realize that they've been duped by the very same concept of this is crazy, it could not be possible, but you had records over the decades of these birds, and they were all kind of Wilson's type things up in the mountains. And then you start putting it together, and it's a certain season when they start showing up, and then they started asking people to report them. They were putting out signs everywhere in all these villages up in the mountains, and they got more data. Then they realized, oh my God, they are coming up here, and eventually netted some going up to nesting sites. They've been able to misnet them and so forth. Some of those birds are in the photographed in the paper in the, it's crazy, right? And then to have that situation from the beers and wine to have that this crazy notion was real, and then that bird is actually a different lineage from all of the other ones. We didn't see it coming at all. And then the moment it did, it was like, of course, that's why they're here and not down in Tierra del Fuego. And that's why they're this little place where it's sort of this happens, and it's not further south than Chile. And it's like, it all kind of came to me. It now makes sense. But what's interesting is so there are some critiques of this paper where people feel it doesn't make sense. And one of them being, for example, the two real pale-bellied bird populations known as Elliots. Our paper finds that they're not each other's closest relatives. So the one in Galapagos and the one on the northern section of the Humboldt Current, sort of Peru, northern Chile.
So they're Galapagensis and gracilis.
Yeah, yeah. And what happens, George, is if you can imagine, right? Like, so they kind of look alike because they both have pale bellies. They're a Wilson-y type thing. They're both each other's geographically closest entities. Everything in your mind is going to say those things have to be each other's closest relatives. And then the genes are telling us they're not. And then you start saying, well, maybe the genes are lying to you. I mean, this is sort of how we often, as birders, sometimes react to some of these oddball genetic things. But how about if the morphology is lying to us, right? Like, because I'm one of the points I made to the taxonomic committee, who's going to have to decide on some of these things, is like, you're out there, with Kate and Brian, watching Wilson storm-petrels and bandrum storm-petrels and leeches out in the East Coast. And people have sometimes until they learn how they fly, a leech storm-petrel and a Wilson storm-petrel might as well be the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, they're dark.
Takes a while before you start to gel with how they're different. Yeah.
Once you know them, they're actually really quite different. But they have the white rump patch. They're dark. They have a pale upper wing band, and you think like, okay, they look like storm petrels because they're both storm petrels. But the genetics have now clarified that those Wilsons and leeches are in two different families, right? So then, if we can be duped into thinking things look similar and they're in two different families, I think we shouldn't be all that worried that within a genus of storm petrels, things look alike, or that they have, or that we concentrated the parts that are different. Some of them have pale bellies, some don't in the Wilson's group. And then we figure that every one of the pale-bellied things has to be closely related to each other. It's like, well, maybe not. Maybe these things kind of switch on and off,
Do you think that the fact that the two northerly two northerly taxons we're talking about here, Galapagensis and gracilis, that those two are paler bellied, is it possible that is just an environmental thing?
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Or it could be a little, who knows, What I do think is a couple of the cool things is that the out of this whole group, the one that is the most basal group, like the sort of the oldest line, is actually the one in Tierra del Fuego. Chilensis is the oldest, and it is very similar to the ones that move north to North America from the Antarctic, but they're not each other's closest relatives. And our genetic data suggests that the ones that go to the US and Canada are only the ones that breed in Antarctica, not the ones that breed in South America or, Exasperatus.
Which is, interesting in that they are, I mean, it's interesting in a couple ways, right? One is that they're the furthest away from North America, which, is, might be a little surprising to some folks given that. But the other thing that's interesting, I guess, is that mostly these other groups, well, I guess we don't know how much they move, right?
We don't know much. Yeah. We kind of know that the ones in Galapagos kind of always look the same, and you don't get the darker bellied birds coming through much.
And the Pincoya is not thought to move very much, right?
Right, not thought to move very much. Seem to be around in the areas most of the year. Yeah, and so this is the first step to a major understanding of these birds. I think hopefully there'll be more focus on a few things, because let's say this is actually accepted and moderately close to the truth, right? Out of these 7 population species, 3 of them have never had their nests found. 3, almost half. Like and you need to find out breeding biology for birds to ever conserve them or understand what they're doing. And we have 3 out of 7 without their nest found.
Wow.
We have no information about the migration of most of them. And we have situations such as birds going inland, which, even over cities with a lot of bright lights and so forth. And what else could we be doing that's negatively impacting them? And maybe once we know they're up there, we could shift how we do certain things, like streetlights in any town in that area maybe should have sort of the low, the lights that point downwards rather than upwards, and just to minimize the number of fatalities from that first flight that the juveniles do to the ocean. There's so many things that start coming up. And also, we didn't sample a lot of populations in the South Indian Ocean, South Georgia, very important. This is all populations.
Just Pacific, pretty much. Some a little bit Atlantic, but
and I think that's valid. Of like this is going to hopefully kickstart some more work. Now, one of the big critiques is that we only used a certain type of DNA called mitochondrial DNA. That's easier to work with and easier to get.
But it's only found in the female, right? It's only passed on.
It passed on by the female line, right? Yeah. So all birds have them, all individuals have it, but it's sort of a matrilineal line of genes. But it does tell you a history. It does actually give you information, and for a long time it was the standard. But the idea of like nuclear genes from the nuclei of a cell, why didn't we use them? And the truth is that we would have loved to, but we just couldn't. We didn't have the right type of material to work with. We didn't have the resources to go out and get the material, right? And we did our asking around for help from various other seabird people who sometimes just couldn't, no fault of what they were up to, or even if they had material. But the idea is that sometimes you just got to publish something to get it out there and
to give folks give folks something to give a toehold from which to expand our knowledge further,
or to react to. Right? Yeah, it might be a negative reaction. They might go, oh, "This is BS," but I'm going to prove them wrong, and hopefully they don't. But
and you should say, right, that the journal is Zootaxa, the mega journal for zoological taxonomists in the world. it is a reputable journal. So.
Reputable journal. Yeah. So I do think there's probably, again, we're visual creatures, so we so want to have everything show up visually, and this is why the Red Cross bills are such a problem for us, right? We would love to be able to ID Red Cross bills based on how they look, but we can't. The types are mostly vocal, that how you do all the differentiation, and you just have to learn that. Well, I think in this case, and it's been shown in the Scopolis shearwater split and that situation, these birds are smelling their species. They're clued in by their nasal passages, to know who to mate with, where to mate with, like even their islands or their colonies. They're probably smelling them almost like salmon that smell their rivers.
Amazing. It's amazing.
And it's amazing. So I would suggest, like, if somebody wanted to get uropygial gland chemistry sorted out for Wilson's storm-petrel, always this whole genus, that they'd probably find some cool stuff. And I would not be surprised if it matches up entirely to what we're finding here, and not to with the way the birds actually look. It's crazy. It's fascinating, and I think it'll have hurdles to get full acceptance, because some of it is outside of what we're comfortable with.
Yeah, it is crazy. And, this is a massive reorganization or start of a reorganization of this genus, right? But we're seeing it also with bandrump storm-petrel and Leach's storm-petrel, right? Similar situations where basically, while they look pretty similar a lot of the time, really we're talking about very, very birds that behave very differently when it comes to their how they breed and when they breed specifically.
Yeah, definitely. And it's I just feel so lucky to have been able to pop in, to the party and start talking storm-petrels with a bunch of really skilled, talented people in South America, and be involved in this, as I'm not doing any of the genetics. I certainly have biogeographical kind of info of where things are and how these birds function. And there is some vocal data that suggests that there are multiple populations of Wilson storm-petrels, but not for every population. Imagine if we had recordings of all of these things, and we can't, because 3 of them aren't even known from a nest, so it's there's so much to be done. But I just feel so excited, lucky, and just crazy feeling to be part of this and be able to tell you all about it, because it's nuts. I mean, if potentially a brand new species of bird.
Yeah, that's wild. Just it's inspiring stuff too, to know that these long-held beliefs and mysteries also just exist,
right?
And that there's still so much amazing work to be done. And I mean, we talk a lot about seabirds on this episode. We've talked a lot about seabirds, but you talk about these birds navigating to some degree, but really sorting out themselves at breeding sites by smell. And you think about these albatrosses using the infrasound, infrasound waves to navigate. I mean, it's hard to imagine a more fascinating group of birds.
Yeah,
they live in the ocean. They just it really is a remarkable group of birds.
Yeah, and these storm-petrels, I think one of the questions that some people might say, okay, so you're telling me these, I don't care if it's a brand new species or not, just the fact that these storm-petrels are up in the Andes, and you're telling me they're seabirds. How does that work, right? Do they go and eat every day on the ocean or whatever? And when I think it's probably something quite sort of like that. They probably go out for a couple of day period of eating and then fly up to the Andes, and then they concentrate all the food in oil, like kind of a stomach oil, if they're feeding young, and they come back and essentially have 2 days worth of foraging that they've concentrated into like a pre-processed food. That is something that most birds do not do or can't. And it allows them to have this lifestyle, right? Like if you can commute to food, really efficient flyer, come in at night you almost could nest anywhere that's safe, right? As long as it's within the reach of your ocean feeding place. It doesn't have to be an island, but it has to be safe. And I guess if you're 2,500 meters in a crevice somewhere in the rocks, 3,000 meters up, you're probably pretty safe, other than, it could snow there.
So the other form, it's what you're calling Barossi is the one, or Andean storm petrel, right?
Yeah.
The other two whose nests are not known, tell us about those two.
Pincoya, which is the one that was described 10 or so years ago, that was the Harrison et al. Paper in the OC. And we think that it might be inland too, that it might actually be going inland, and probably not in the same kind of high mountain areas, but I could imagine it being a lot lower down, but also in some kind of crevicey,
like rocky slopes or something.
Rocky slopes, yeah. And the other one is the one in Galapagos, which is actually the one that I find so incredible. How many people go birding or naturalizing or biologizing?
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's never been found. And
it's also it's abundant.
Yeah, it's abundant.
It's probably, if you go to the Galapagos, it's probably the most, on a typical Galapagos birding cruise, it's probably the most numerous bird you see there.
Yeah. And I think if you kind of are logical about it, George, like you think if it's nesting on little islets or on cliffs somewhere, people would have found them already, right? They have to be where people aren't. And I assume that that's those big old lava flows up the mountains.
Like on Isabella and Fernandina.
Isabella, right? I bet they're going into places like that are, I mean, just if you try to walk even a block in that stuff, you cannot do it.
There's a famous story from the neck of Isabella, kind of the isthmus, the skinniest part. There was a old Ecuadorian military sergeant, or I don't know what his rank was, but he decided that as a drill, he would send like 30 soldiers from that skinniest part from one side to the other to cross to the other, right. And something like half of the guys died. And it was a huge military blemish on their record, because within a couple miles, and this is something even for bird tours it's worth knowing, is that there is nothing better for peeling off the sole of one's boots than walking on lava rock for a little while. I've seen it on Hawaii trips. I've seen it on Galapagos trips. People get out on lava rock, and it just like the soles of boots, if they're old and the glue's all dried out, just come right off. And that's what happened to these soldiers. As they got out there, their boots fell apart, and then they're stuck out there, and you can't walk on that that lava. It's they say you call it because you walk on it, it's really uncomfortable, and some of them fell into caves. But I mean, it is remote. It is beyond rugged out there.
Right.
That would make a lot of sense. That's an interesting idea. I'd never heard that or considered it before.
Yeah, that's my guess. That's I think what's going on with them, and it's there's other questions that like I said, multiple populations. We had different of the Antarctic group, but not all around Antarctica, and I'd be really sort of interested to see if, and I'm guessing that actually all of the Antarctic birds, no matter what longitude they're at, they're going to be the same population. And it it's the question too of like, okay, so you guys in the North Atlantic get a ton of these Antarctic birds going up. We don't in the West Coast. It's kind of a rare bird for us. But the assumption is that they're the same population, that Antarctic one. But that would be great to have genetic data on that. We do know that the measurement data matches up because the Antarctic ones are the largest. So the North American birds are large. So that all matches up. The genes and the morphology match. But there are, folks, Bob Flood out in the UK, he's mentioned that there are small birds, and there's a publication, small birds, some with pale bellies, that are being seen in parts of the, I guess, the African continent, even, in Europe every so often. I'm just kind of like trying to remember exactly what the thing is and what are those things. Are they one of the other populations? Are they the Falkland birds? What are they? And again, that I'm not sure that we're going to be able to figure it out without some genetic work in that case. And it could be that what they're seeing on their side of the Atlantic is not what we see on the American side of the Atlantic.
That's true.
Right?
That would be fascinating, and from a listing perspective, would be fun too if it was something different. Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's all sorts of questions, and I hope we can, over the next 10 years, we're going to know a lot more, and it's pretty wild. All we wanted to clarify was that Pincoya it's a thing. we didn't know we were going to get into this, like, oh my God, look at all this.
Slipped right down a rabbit hole there. Yeah.
Right.
I do think I wonder that the two northernmost ones are the paler bellied ones, if that has to do with the way light's reflected at that latitude more often compared to the ones that are more southerly.
But Pincoya is pale bellied too.
Oh, okay. So yeah, okay. And then the Barossa is typically darker.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Moderately darker.
Then that falls apart. Never mind. Yeah.
Yeah.
My little pet theory there. It's just
pet theory.
Yeah. Oh well.
Gone. And I what else to say about these birds is that, so it opens up your mind to other things, like you said, we know now that Leach's storm-petrels, Banram storm-petrels, white-faced storm-petrel. Now, somebody should look into that, because I bet it is multiple. Maybe somebody has, and I'm just completely blanking out. But there are multiple species level taxa in white-faced storm-petrel. Basically, every one of these things. It's like
each population
looks. Yeah.
I mean, even albatross, right? They find that with a lot of different, some of these more widely scattered populations of what are considered the same species of albatross. Yeah. They've come around on that.
Yeah, and it's, let's say the smell issue is the one that's driving species recognition without the need for plumage changes. Then you think, like, remember we've talked about turkey vultures in the past with the different head colors and stuff.
Oh boy!
I wonder if they smell each other.
Yeah, that's if anything could.
If anything could,
Yeah.
So
that's a very good point.
It's pretty cool because it does. I'm one of these people that when my mind kind of gets open to something I'd never really thought about, I start overthinking it almost, like, and going like, where else did we miss this? Where else is but that paper on the shearwaters, that there's a difference, chemical signal that's different, that matches up to scopoles, and at least in the colony where they're both together, what have you, I forget what it is, but that it matches up to the genetics and the morphology. It was that blew my mind, and from there on, I'm like, I cannot unsmell that paper.
I feel like that'd be a good title for this episode. But
yeah.
But we'll see.
Yeah, birds that stink.
Yeah, that's right. Birds that stink. Yeah.
And the birds that stink phenomenon the the other day, storm petrels have a really specific smell, and it's like a musty with a kind of oily and fishy and whatever. I was jogging on the coastal trail here, and I'm like, I smell storm petrels. I said, what's going on? I stopped in my tracks. I was smelling storm petrels, and like I'm convinced I'm smelling that. It's like it's just really obvious what's going on. And I realized that there's like a parking lot next door where they had laid down some new asphalt. And
there it is.
That smell was actually moderately similar, that it keyed off my storm petrel
senses. Yeah.
Yeah. Then I was like,
what'll be really good is when you're at sea sometime and you're like, is that a pincoya?
Right. But in the Galapagos, when you're at the big colony of wedge drum storm petrels, you can smell that colony.
Oh, yeah.
You can smell the whole thing. And when you're getting closer to it, when I first sniff it, I say to people, do you guys smell it? And they're like, oh, you're kind of crazy. And then a little later, you'll get
they're like,
people,
I smell it now.
I smell something. Yeah, and it's not poop. It's, and I said, yeah, it's storm petrel smell. It's musty, oily something, It's
Genovesa. Genovesa, if you can get there on a Galapagos trip, that storm petrel colony is pretty unforgettable. It is something to see, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, we have covered a lot here, and this will not be the last we discuss these birds, I'm sure, because this is a big onion, and I feel like you're going to be peeling it for a while still, and they'll just be, well, not just you, but others on the Pacific side and elsewhere, or other side of the Pacific and other side of the Atlantic. Folks will be peeling back this onion. So it's going to be fun to see how this develops. And, Al, we will have to do some work on the white-faced storm petrels on our cruise coming up later this year.
White-faced storm petrel.
We will see hundreds, if not thousands. So I'm very excited about that.
Ooh, Mauritanicus. Is that right? Or something like that? No.
They call it Mauriana, I think. Right?
Mauriana.
It's named for the Maori. Yeah.
Mauriana.
Yeah.
Cool,
man. Well, anything you want else want the good folks to know before we sign off here?
Well, I could talk to you about trips like Japan and so forth, but why don't I just say, since this has been a seabirding one, that we still have a lot of pelagics left till October, that things are weird, and weird is good in the ocean world.
Right. When you're not talking about J.D. Vance, weird is okay.
Yeah. That's right. So it's weird is okay in the ocean world, and we just look forward to bringing out some more people and seeing some cool stuff. And you never know, but I bet we're gonna be talking more about some oddball things that's gonna show up this season. It's my guess.
Seems like it is headed that way. You guys really are seems like on fire at the moment. And hopefully that food setup for those seabirds continues for a while to come. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I would encourage folks to take a look at hillstarnature.com. We have a Puerto Rico trip with Jason Hall and with Josh Coville coming up in March, and Holly Merker has a Panama trip as well to the Canal Zone that also touches the Cherokee Highlands for a whole bunch of Talamanca endemics. Definitely check out Holly's trip to Panama as well. And I have a new India trip that I'm pretty stoked about for December of 2025. A little over a year away. We've got a couple spots that have gone already, as I've circulated out to a few friends. But we are doing a swing through the Ghats, the coastal mountain range in southern India, and then finish up in Nagarol National Park, which is arguably India's most spectacular national park, a good place for tiger and a good place for wild dogs and for a whole host of other animals. So that is coming up. Check out India, the Ghats, and the Deccan Plateau trip that I'm doing. That's all I got for now. Al, you have a good day. Everybody, thanks for listening.
Bye-bye.